All right, please proceed then.
Good morning. Thank you for your service. I know a lot of times people don't understand how appreciative I am, the court is, the state, and the defendant is for you giving us your time. It is an important civil duty to serve on a jury. You've been here for 4 days, and on this rainy day, hopefully, this will be the last day you're here for the week. I want to express my thanks to the state, Ms. Swanson, for trying a good case. She can only try the case with the facts and the evidence that's given to her by the Sheriff's Department. She's done a good job trying to try this case. I want to thank the court for giving my client, Craig, his day in court, a fair trial. My team, my supporting team, I want to thank Brian Murdoch. This is his first, and he's sitting with me, and I think he's done a fine job. I want to thank Teresa McDonald from my office for helping out with trial, and most importantly, I want to thank my client, Craig Lewis, for putting his life in my hands, for trusting me to zealously advocate for him. And in that regard, I want to say this. If something I personally did that you didn't approve of, don't take it out on my client. Take it out on me. At the beginning of trial, I told you there were some things you would not hear and some evidence you would not see. I told you that there is a lot going on in this case that will require your independent life experiences, your knowledge of Walterboro, your knowledge of the people here. That's invaluable. I did not tell you the story of Terry Lewis, Craig Lewis, and Leanne because I wanted you to hear that story as it developed from the witness stand. What have you heard? Leanne and Craig knew each other first since high school. They're only months apart in age. He would hang out at their house. Craig dropped out of school and moved into the house with Terry and Leanne. Leanne went to college. Craig and Terry fell in love. They began a relationship. He continued to live with Terry for years until 27 when he married the love of his life, who was 23 years older at 49. And Leanne told you that she didn't stay much at the house since then. It may not be pretty. You may not approve. But that's the story. Now let's get to why we're here. We're here because Craig is charged with a horrendous crime, murder and arson. Craig represents the antithesis of why I still practice criminal law, because everyone is presumed innocent. They deserve a fair shot at life. They deserve to be treated fairly. They deserve representations that is guaranteed to them under our Constitution. They deserve to not have trash thrown at them and then wanting to turn it into evidence. They deserve not to be kicked. They deserve not to be boxed. They deserve not to be lied upon. January 17th, Craig rushes his wife to the hospital with serious burn injuries. This is where your common sense as a Walterboro citizen. Everybody knows that Longleaf is where an Academy Road and all of that area near Colleton Prep is very close to the hospital. The hospital's on Robertson Boulevard. What would you do if your spouse is burning? Would you sit there and wait 5 to 10 minutes for the ambulance that's further away? Or would you jump, clothe your wife, since she's burnt her clothes, clothe her and get her to the hospital as quick as possible? That argument about him cleaning up, that doesn't make any sense. And I'll explain to you that further. They arrived at the hospital, from what Dr. Fisher says, uncontroverted by the state. Dr. Fisher says 12:14 is their arrival time. He doesn't say anything about that it looked to be old burn wounds, but yet they want to make it seem like Craig sat there for a long time. He says chief complaint, smoke inhalation, thermal burn. Then he says occurred just, not late, or appeared to be old. He said occurred just prior to arrival. Doesn't get any plainer than that. Then he says, it says her progression is unchanged, but this is the most important part. Context of onset of her injuries. She's painful. It doesn't radiate into her extremities, which means she doesn't have body injuries. Severe pain. Nothing wrong with her eyes. Patient denies any other symptoms. Now, why are we here when we have this statement? And I want you to take this back and read it. 63-year-old female with history of diabetes mellitus, hyperlipidemia, hypertension, thyroid disease, presents to emergency department, complaining of burns onset, once again, to refute what the state has said, just prior to arrival. It doesn't get any simpler than that. Patient states, the patient trying to start a fire in the fireplace with a lighter fluid. Patient states, not husband, patient states the flame shot backwards and caught the patient and her clothes on fire. Patient admits diffuse pain. Patient denies eye pain or vision changes. There are no other complaints at this time. That's real simple. I don't understand why we're here with this statement. Why didn't the sheriff's department read this statement or ask to talk to the doctor? Then there was much ado about what happened after the doctor. At one point, one of the detectives even testified that, oh, he left the hospital quickly. Well, then we refuted that. I had to pull it out of Nurse Bishop, but she finally admitted that because I showed her where she is the one that witnessed at 1431 Craig Lewis's signature. Nurse Bishop is the one. So after the sheriff's department, if they wanted to investigate, saw that, this case should have been over. He didn't just leave as if he was hiding something. He stayed there. As a matter of fact, I was able to get it out of Leanne that he called her a couple of times saying, you need to hurry up, get here. Dr. Fisher talked about how he counseled. He read it to you. I counseled with husband and wife. He told you that after he counseled with them, wife agreed for her intubation. It was to protect her airways, and husband was agreeable to the intubation. Dr. Fisher testified that at 12:27, he intubated her, and it went well. He said after that, all he wanted to do was make sure she got to the Augusta Burn Center. That was the plan. And that's what Craig called and told Leanne. Leanne kept talking about Atlanta at that point, but it was an hour or so later when they had to change the plan because they got a call back from the Augusta Burn Center that, guess what? Unfortunately, the Burn Center in Augusta didn't have a bed. So then they changed course and had to fly her to Atlanta. With this written proof of accidental burn, and with Leanne getting there about 3 hours late after this, that's the first time. And after Craig left, we hear anything about this was not an accident. But the problem I have with that is that she didn't go to the doctor. She went to the nurse. Now let's talk about how and I made sure Dr. Fisher got into this because the state on opening, and you rely upon your memory, the state on opening said that Terry Lewis, I remember the state getting up and saying, Terry Lewis on the whole front of her body had third-degree burns. Dr. Fisher explains that third degree is the worst type. First degree is like a sunburn. Second degree is less severe. It wasn't until we got up that we find the consistency to prove accidental. He says she had the worst burns down here. Those with third degree, that's the only place she had third degree. And it wasn't on her foot. No burns on her foot, that wasn't wrapped. And the reason why I'm bending down is because what happens if you're burned on your foot or on your, not on your foot. What happens if you get fire caught right here? You bend over and you're trying to get the object off of you. And then what happens is, now this is where common sense comes in. Fire comes up. It doesn't go down. Fire rises. She's bending down trying to remove the article, and that's when she gets burned up here. That's when the soot moves up. The state would have you think that lighter fluid doesn't cause fire to blow back. But I see commercials on that all the time. I've lit fires myself. It doesn't add up. It makes no sense. I've asked myself 5 years later, why are we still here with the evidence? The only credible, written, unbiased evidence was done by the doctor. One thing I will give Leanne credit for is that she says that when she was in the room with Craig, some 3 hours later, he was sitting in the corner, couldn't talk because he was so distraught. She finally admitted that he was distraught. But the state won't bring that up to you. During the 3 hours, while they're waiting, during the 3 hours, not one nurse, not one PA, not Dr. Fisher detects that there's been anything but a horrific accident. In fact, when Leanne arrives, she describes, after she talks about my client being distraught, he tells her once again, Your mom was messing around with the fire. I think he said playing around with the fire. And it went back on her. As they continue to wait in the room, Leanne concocts her own theory. By theory, she described from the witness stand, I was thinking it was a possibility. Well, we can't prove a case on possibility. I was thinking it was a possibility of what happened. She then goes and questions the nurse, and the next thing we know, law enforcement gets called. Things for Craig Lewis changed drastically. First to the hospital comes Shauna Tozier. She talks to Leanne, looks at Terry Lewis's feet, saw that they were clean and untouched, does not talk to the doctor. Wow. Does not secure the video from the hospital. Wow. Does not even interview the nurse or the PA who called. Wow, wow. Then Sheriff Andy Strickland immediately puts out a be on the lookout for Craig Lewis driving a black SUV. They go straight to his house within minutes. Brian Vonnerdo, who went to school with Craig, has known Craig all of their life. Along with David Long, Craig let them in the house. They walk in the house and talk to him. And the next thing I know, they want to know why you didn't call them. Why would you, if your loved one has caught themselves on fire, you're going to protect them and get them to the emergency room. You're not going to sit and call the police department for a fire. After they got their explanation from Craig, he goes to get in his SUV. They told him he could go. He went to get in his SUV. As he's getting in the SUV, he puts in the keys, turns it on, and they swarm on him. And Angela Stallings testified, finally I got it out of her, that now Craig is as big as he is. She leans into that SUV and leans over him, grabs the key. You ain't going nowhere. It makes sense. Get him out of the car. Well, why not just say, Craig, you need to get out of the car. We need to talk to you some more. No, get him out of the car. You ain't going anywhere. They swarm the back of the house. Within seconds, 12 deputies are there. When Angela gives the command, when she gives the command, they go to take this 6'6" man down any way they can, but they were trying to slam him next to his truck on the concrete. Craig wouldn't let them. He sidestepped and went down on the grass, and because he took those 2 steps to keep himself from being injured, they kick him and they box him. You know how you can tell he was boxed? This little state finally gave us that shows what happened. They had no information about what happened, and they did that to a person, a citizen in Colleton County. Then, after that happened, remember David Long in his testimony? Very evasive. He's the first one in the house. As long as it's Brian Vonnerdo and himself, him and Craig can talk very easily. There's no problem. It wasn't until he missed that first swing that he was and gave Craig that he became evasive. He says during the takedown that he didn't want to show me his fist, but I finally got it out of him that he injured that. Angela Stallings told you Craig received a minor laceration. That is crazy. She still didn't put in her report that Craig had to be x-rayed at the hospital and checked out for the bruises and the kicks because of what happened to his back and his ribs. Right is right and wrong is wrong. A lie is a lie no matter what car it travels in. You should tell the whole truth. They had the medical records. You know why? Because when you're in custody at the in Colleton County, when you're in police custody, they take you to the emergency room. They get your medical records because the county has to pay for it. Because they kicked on him, because they hit on him, the county had to pay for that service. It doesn't make sense. And she calls it, oh, he just got a Band-Aid. You have to look at the demeanor of all, and your jury charge is going to tell you that. Look at the demeanor of all of their testimony. Not one was consistent. David Long says, I gave him his Miranda. Then I believe Kelly Paget came and said she gave him the Miranda. I don't know who gave him the Miranda. Nobody had a written Miranda form to get it signed out of their car, out of all of those cars. What I find most interesting out of this is Stallings says that she was over dispatch, but yet she did not preserve the 911 recording. Don't you think you would have needed that? They charged this man with murder and arson and didn't listen to the dispatch recording? Oh, come on. And she's the supervisor, she was trained, and she didn't think it was necessary to write a report for you? And 5 years later, we got to get her to think about what she said or create a story? She is the lead investigator. She didn't even go back to the hospital, not even 2 miles away from this house. She didn't go to the hospital and even talk to the nurse, talk to the PA, talk to the doctor. No, she didn't. And let me ask you this. From the witness stand, can you tell who was actually in charge of this investigation? I saw a lot of this. No, he was in charge. Jason Chapman said, no, she was in charge. I don't think they know who was in charge. You know why? Because they know they were dropping the ball. How about this? We wouldn't even be here today. If I am to believe 1/10 of what Leanne says from the stand, she says her mama was lucid, I think was the word she used, that after her mama stayed in the hospital in Atlanta and was transferred in May to the Charleston Hospital for rehab, she said her mama was lucid. Well, let's look at that. If her mama was lucid, and if the sheriff department wanted to get to the truth in this case, shouldn't one of those investigators have gone to Charleston? It ain't that far away.
Objection, Your Honor. May we approach?
Yes, let's go.
As Angela Stallings and Jason Chapman are sitting there pointing their fingers at who's in charge, Craig Lewis sat in jail from the 17th.
I'm sorry, can you rule on that? Was that sustained?
I'm sorry. We're talking about
We probably ought to do that outside of the presence of the jury if we're going to actually do that. Did you want to?
I want to proceed.
Okay, all right.
And I will start again. As Angela Stallings and Jason Chapman sat there pointing fingers at who should be in charge of the investigation, my client, Craig Lewis, sat in jail from January 17th to February 19th. He, if I go by what has been testified to, had already been Mirandized by 2 officers. Both Jason Chapman, after a little bit of prodding, finally admitted that they never even went over and talked to Craig Lewis to get his story. Perhaps the reason why Chapman and Stallings, as witnesses, were so defensive, at least appearing to me, is because they knew they dropped the ball. Let's look at Kelly Pageant and David Long. Their reports, too, are inconsistent. Does it make sense that both of them would have read Miranda rights? No. Sheriff Anley Strickland goes to the hospital, talks to Craig, and finds the couch that he instructed someone to take to the dump, that Craig had previously had someone to take to the dump on the side of the road. Does this sound like Craig not cooperating? No. They confiscated Craig's phone. Did they bring you the evidence of what they confiscated? Because if so, then they would have been able to go in the phone, dump it, get the information, and backtrace on who Craig called to move the sofa as he's sitting there with his wife. We have to think of common sense. They could have found out, they would have found the text and everything. But we don't have that. I don't have the burden of proving anything. He went from the couch and helping them find the couch to lock up. There has been much ado about this burnt couch. Why is the couch so important? I don't know. Who would keep a burning couch or a couch that has been burnt in their house if they know they're going to be in Atlanta with their wife for fear that it will reignite and burn your whole house down? Doesn't it make sense that he's trying to get ready to head to the burn center in Atlanta? Who carried the burned sofa away? Sheriff's Department had the ability to have that person here. And why they put it where they put it, why they put it, it has nothing to do with this case. They confiscated not only Craig's phone, they confiscated his wife's phone. But yet they didn't put any of that in the evidence. And coincidentally, when you became jurors in this case, that's why I asked, do any of you look at crime shows? 31 days in lockup. Many officers involved in this case. Crickets. Now, you've seen a lot of evidence. All of this evidence here. Look at this sofa. Look at the sofa. Look at the one they got off the side of the road. Look at the blanket that has the smothering burn on it. They didn't test any of that stuff. They knew they had the burden of proof. This sofa has not even been tested to see if it had lighter fluid on it. Who would burn their wife sitting on a sofa and throw it on their legs first? That's the only part of the sofa that's messed up. I heard some talk of the door to the fireplace being closed. I didn't enter this in the evidence. They did. They collected the sofa inserts off the side of the road in the blanket. You remember Officer Chapman, I had to get him to admit, oh, there's white cotton that looked, and if you look a little bit closer, you'll see the singe marks. Did they test that? Now, the other much ado in this case, I will admit, I was like, where would blood come from? Then it made sense. Dr. Fisher said, no, you don't find a lot of blood with burn because it cauterizes. So, but they test the bloody footprints, doesn't have anybody here to tell us how old those bloody footprints were. Of course it's her blood. She lives in the house. She has a lot of medical issues. They don't say when they occurred or how they occurred. They just want you to live on probably, maybe, this is how I think it happened. That's not enough. And you know, they talk about this case being an old case, yeah? Well, it took me asking Miss Lacey, or Lacey, I'm not sure how to pronounce her name, that did the DNA. They took the swabs of her, Miss Lewis's DNA when she died on November the 3rd at MUSC. That's when the pathologist collected it. You know when Miss Lacey said she got the swabs to do the comparison? In 2022. All while Craig is languishing. They didn't worry about it. Somebody dropped that ball too. They didn't realize, I believe, that Dr. Fisher would talk about the cauterization of blood. They didn't realize that Shanatoja went to the hospital and saw a clean, untouched foot. They don't realize that you know that the burden is on them to bring a nurse here or bring a doctor here that says, I cleaned off her foot. I cleaned blood off of it. They could have gotten the nurse's notes. They didn't realize you understand when they clean your foot or they clean blood off you, it's usually some type of iodine that will leave a color. She said clean, untouched foot. The wood burning stove. Let me show you what I put into evidence. This is really crazy. Here is the picture. That's defense exhibit number 5. The door is clearly open. There is clearly a lighter fluid can on top of the stove. And yet, no one testified from that witness stand. And it's sort of embarrassing to me. Do you mean to tell me Colleton County, no one out of those 12 people that came to the scene doing investigations, nobody knows how to lift fingerprints? They didn't even bother to lift fingerprints off of this lighter fluid can. I could bet you if Craig's fingerprints were on there, you would have been presented with that evidence. That's just unbelievable. And yet they come here and try to show you pictures of a closed door with some debris. As old as this house looks and as old as this stove looks, they can't tell you when that debris was put there or what happened. They didn't even bother make an attempt to bring you a cause and origin expert. The burden is on the state. They didn't even bother to get someone from the fire department to come and say, hey, this is my specialty, this is what I do, I determine fires, this looks like it's been set this long ago. No. They just want to call Craig a murderer. Then they said, oh, we felt the log. What? You felt the log? and you couldn't get in the house until 5:30, pursuant to the search warrant. If all the fire blew out, there's none gonna be in the fire. There's much ado about residue from the house. They didn't even test it, so I don't know why they testified to it. I saw even one that looked like there was dog urine. They talked about that on the floor. I don't understand. You have here some bags. You got a bag which appears to be jeans. They just threw it in to evidence. Didn't test that either. Another bag which appears to be jeans. And she says the reason why she put this in is there was debris on the bottom of the pants leg. So which one was he wearing? They hadn't tested that either. But yet they talk about burn pits he had at his other house. Perhaps it came from that. And wouldn't you expect stuff at somebody's house? They want you to figure out which one is real evidence, because we know he wasn't wearing 2 jeans. We don't even know what he was wearing. Why are we here? The only written evidence we have that an accident happened came from Terry Lewis's own statement to medical experts. This is an accidental burn. This is not an arson. This is not a murder. We're here only because of speculation and possibility. Leanne is the real reason why we're here. No one has shown you how Terry was burned or when Terry was burned. No one has shown when Craig got to the house. Just that he got there in time to save his wife. In order to get to why Leanne made these allegations and why after 5 years Craig is still facing arson and murder charges, I had to go where they say you have to go sometime. I had to follow the money. Follow the money, sometimes you'll find people's motives. The check. I know we live in a digital age, and I know most people don't get their checks. But we have a check here that is Exhibit 6. Says January 15th is the date of the check. It's written to Leanne Kellum, $1,200, with a scribbly signature of Leanne's mother, Terry Lewis, signing it. The same mother who Dr. Rinkin said had tremors. In November, she had tremors. I submit to you to think about this. This check is on the 15th. Leanne says she was there to their house on Kansas City on the 16th. Everything's copacetic because she's needing money and wanting $25,000 and wanting him to put the house in her name, in his name. Why then would that little story she told about why she wrote this check the day before and that her mama was planning on leaving Craig, why would they do this on Tuesday? She go to the house, this check it would be on Tuesday, January the 15th. She goes to the house on Wednesday. She's texting back and forth, and she's trying to say her mother did this on Tuesday knowing that she was leaving for Leanne to get her some money so that she could help her mama get out of the marriage. But yet, this is what's telling. Leanne does not cash this check until January 23rd. That tells me that she predated a check to make it look good, but she didn't realize she would have to testify to being up there and up there at the house the day before. Makes no sense whatsoever. Follow the money. I wouldn't blame the state. I wouldn't blame them not wanting me to get into the fact that Leanne, within days of her mama's burning, accidental burning, froze attempted to freeze Craig's assets. She knew that Craig had inherited cash and that it was in a safety deposit box. She had it frozen by the court when she did her conservatorship. They didn't want me to get into it. Here's the order. It's for you to read. The order is real clear. While she was conservator over her mama's estate, $4,454.90 in expenditures she couldn't account for, and $1,832 of expenditures went to other people, not Terry Lewis. Even though she says she's got reasons why she did it, now she says her mama wanted her to do those things. Who thinks of doing a GoFundMe 4 days after something horrific like this? Who thinks of that? Here's that. She got the money from that, but because it was in reference to a crime that she was alleging, I wonder why she had to take it down. What's disturbing to me is when asked about the life insurance policy, the life insurance policy was paid for from their joint account, Terry and Craig's joint account. She tells us that her mother was lucid enough to tell her in May of 2019 that, yes, Leanne, you deserve that money. Go and change that $25,000 life insurance policy to yourself. And you saw her expression. That's when she crossed her legs and said, yes, Mom told me to change it, move Craig as beneficiary and put myself as beneficiary. Shortly afterwards, May, the same May that the life insurance beneficiary was changed, the do not resuscitate was signed by Leanne. And then she starts talking about how Mom lost the will to live, would not get out of bed, stopped getting out of the bed, developed pneumonia and bed sores. She says big enough where you could put a fist in. Had to be sent back to Augusta Nursing Home by November 1st. Craig's wife that he took care of. He took care of her through bipolar, dementia, tremors, double mastectomy. He stood by her. Craig's wife, he wasn't able to see her from the time he left Colleton Medical. He has never seen his wife again. Never. His life was forever changed. That was a 25-year investment. Perhaps she didn't want Craig to be with her mother, but that's who he chose. She died, never seen her husband. Perhaps she would have been able to thrive if she had him. Because she, from the witness stand, said that her mother got better from the burns. So if her mother got better from the burns, why are we here on murder? Doesn't make any sense. Her mother got better from the burns. She went back to have a neck adjustment. Allegations of the abuse the night before. Let's unpack that bag. What daughter would allow their mother to be treated in the way she described without defending her and, more importantly, calling the police? That is the craziest allegation I've ever heard. Here's the abuse if I listen to what she says. Mom is waiting outside of a dark trailer at 2 o'clock in the morning. I had to elicit from her that mom was actually sitting. Where are the 3 dogs? She doesn't talk about that. She arrives, takes her away, and turns around to get her keys and wallet. First she said keys and medicine. And then after I asked her about her statement, then she says keys and wallet because she needed to buy cigarettes. But before she said she usually buys her mama her cigarettes. Mom beats on the door and Craig comes to the door, slings the door open, pushes mom down this long ramp, the ramp he made for her because she was falling a lot. You see how long that ramp is? Mom lands on the dirt, which means he would have had to push her with such violent force that she would have tumbled over or whatever. There is no way that you can even buy her story because that is a long ramp. When I asked, where were you parked when you saw it? Because she says it was dark. Oh, yeah, I guess around here. Okay. I drove around there. Well, here's what you do. You look at what her vantage point is. Then when she realized where the next question was, she said she got out. What daughter would stand there and let somebody slam their mama's hand in the door one time? What daughter would stand there and let somebody grab their mama's face and slam down into a grill? And coincidentally, if you look at the picture, if you got the door open, you can't get to the grill. While Brian finds me State's Exhibit 48, I want you to look at that and tell me, imagine this at 2 o'clock in the morning in her story she gave. First, the other thing she said on direct examination, and I want you to remember her body language. I made note of the fact that at that point, her legs were crossed. Her body language changed. I asked her, how many times was this? How many times was the fall? He pushed her down 3 times and you didn't grab your mama who was apparently having a manic or some type of problem? I'm totally befuddled by it. I want you to look at the grill. Thank you. Is there one with the ramp? When I asked Leanne about the falls, she said it was 3. She said he pushed her down. And I said, well, where did she land? Because I wanted to know, he built this ramp for her because of her problems. I wanted to know, where did she fall? On the dirt. Well, look at how long that is. Then he supposedly, and Leanne says she was there. I don't know whether she was on the ramp or there, but I don't have the burden. There's a grill right there. She says that Craig slung open this door. If you sling open the door, oh, come on. Who's going to stand there and let him, he would have to put her head around the door in order to slam it. Don't let anybody insult your intelligence. This makes no sense. No police report. What daughter is going to allow their mother, who is frail, who has all of these problems, to be attacked? And just hours before, you were there asking for $25,000 and a house to be put in Craig's name. I don't know. What daughter wouldn't take their mom, who's such a frail person, to an emergency room? You know she's got problem with instability. You know she has like 9 different chronic health conditions. She's 63 years old. Her head has just, if I go with you, has been slammed into a grill. What daughter would not take their mama to the emergency room? Come on. Was the money more important than mama? Let's talk about Terry's medical condition. Leanne sat right there and said, oh, the tremors had resolved. Well, Dr. Rinkin said in November, she still had the same medical problems. Falls, tremors, dementia. She had the 2014 incident was where she had lithium toxicity and was in the hospital also with falling. Then he said she has a chronic condition of hyperthyroidism. That causes you to be laggy and it causes you to fall sometimes. But most importantly, Dr. Rinkin, who has been treating her since 2010, says that she had never, he said that Terry reported when she had to stay in the hospital on the 4th floor and have the psychological eval, the report that he got, they asked that specific question of any of their patients, and he said the report that he got said Terry had never reported any form of abuse. If the state wanted to give you the truth, wouldn't they have found? Before I believe in believing in my client, it helps me fight harder for them. First thing I did was subpoena the sheriff's department and the police department ad infinitum. I want any allegations of abuse. Show me all incident reports coming out of Terry Lewis, Leanne, and Craig. We found reports of other stuff. Nothing regarding any criminal domestic violence, and he's not charged and never been charged with criminal domestic violence, nor has Terry been charged with criminal domestic violence.
Objection, Your Honor, arguing facts that are not within the record.
Let's come around here for a moment, thanks.
As all of the officers came here to testify, not a one testified that Craig Lewis, prior to January 17th, 2019, had ever had a criminal domestic violence. Same thing for Terry. So why are we to believe Leanne? Do you believe Dr. Rinkin on her medical condition or Leanne? Do you believe what Leanne said about Craig's infidelity? Wouldn't Leanne know best whether that story is true? One thing is certain, her relationship with Craig and her thirst for money gives her the motive to lie and concoct a crazy story that we've heard and get him arrested with hopes of him going away. and her getting the money. Follow the money. In closing, think of this. There is no way this 6'6" man would burn his wife on her legs to kill her. All those medications she was under, there are many, many ways he could have done that. Why would he kill her? I don't know whether you heard it or not, but when they were talking about the clothes that was taken off Miss Terry, they had to cut her clothes off her. And Terry was so sick, she was wearing Depends. Why come in here and say this was all third-degree burns when you know, with a little bit of checking, that the worst burns were down bottom? What makes sense? How can he would have had to get on his knee. For 6'6", he would have had to get on the floor to throw something on her or set her on fire. She says, oh, Terry always sat in that chair. They got 3 dogs. Look at the chair. Look at the pictures of the chair. And then she said, I don't go over to the house that much, so how can she testify to that? Where Terry sat. It makes no sense. It makes sense what Terry said. The records don't lie. When she bent over trying to get her clothes off, the fire spread to her face. She probably ran around freaking out. It makes sense that she, having tremors, smoking cigarettes, she's shaking. Some of the lighter fluid got on her pants leg, and then when she lit the fire, it blew back on her. Common sense. And she can't get around that well, so she probably stumbled over to the couch. What does make sense, though, is that Terry Lewis loved Craig, and Craig loved Terry. He loved her so much, she burnt her clothes off. He made sure that she was covered enough and got her into that hospital. Do we have an arson? Do we have a murder? We have only an accident and a miscarriage of justice to my client, Craig Lewis. His wife is gone. And all they seem to care about is getting a pound of flesh.